Well, the strategic subjects list, SSL, was developed from a team from IIT, and they finally made their sort of equations and approach public maybe about 20 months ago. So we didn't know a lot about actually what was behind it for a long time. What it tried to do, what the SSL tried to do, was identify using police data people who were at risk of victimization or gunshot injury or potential involvement in gunshot crime. So it created a list, right? Or at least a score. That's what we know about that. That is actually, there's two parts of that. One is sort of the science behind it, which is, understanding these factors that put people at risk, which we do in lots of contexts, and not just in the criminal justice context, in the healthcare context, in educational contexts, all of which have benefits and problems. And what we're trying to do is not like develop a list of people that are, should be identified with the police, but in fact, think about how networks impact behavior. There are ideas of understanding about how can that be leveraged for prevention or intervention. And as I've written about in the Tribune and the New York Times, there's a big difference between how you apply these things, right? So applying something in the criminal justice context, if you put it in the space that people are referring to as predictive policing, you cross constitutional lines, you cross moral lines, but the same sort of approach in, say, victim services, trauma response, street outreach is quite different because you're not, say, infringing on people's liberty or livelihood. A great example of this is how we use the very same approach to studying infectious disease. And so historically in the world of HIV or needle exchange, you do these sorts of mapping exercises or use these sort of statistical approaches to identify where you'll have the greatest impact on spreading slowing the rates of infection. And I recently wrote this op-ed in The Hill because people are thinking about contact tracing. The science behind contact tracing is much the same way. Who's at risk? How do we reach them to slow it down and save lives? And that's a different approach than, say, just generating a list and kind of working a list. And so, it's hard to say the overlap behind the science because they haven't been like compared or contrasted. But the idea of using data, in these spaces is an old one. And it's just one of multiple ways you could kind of look at that.